That's none of your business. If we were being honest, that is the answer we would give to questions that make us feel uncomfortable. So, why do we sometimes feel compelled to give answers to these questions? Because we don't want to look like the bad guy in the public eye. However, as soon as we divulge our personal information, we can be sure that it will spread throughout the public in the form of gossip quickly enough and return to foil our plans. So then we end up betraying ourselves. Therefore, we have to find a way to repel these uncomfortable questions. However, some strategies are better than others. So what are some examples of uncomfortable questions? The classic one is, how much money do you make? And anybody would know that this is a rude question because it's common knowledge at this point. Even your interlocutor would know that. But why are they asking if not to cause damage? So that's a conversation you want to back away from. Another related question is, what do you do for a living? And I know in general terms this is completely acceptable. Like, for me, I would say I'm a writer and a teacher. All right, if we can leave it at that. But some people pry more and more with follow-up questions to the point where it seems they want to know your functioning across the whole day. So that's getting a little too personal, I would say, especially early on. Another uncomfortable question would be, who are you seeing? And if you start telling too much, then that could cause problems not only for you, but also whoever you are seeing, which is not good. Again. And another example I would give of an uncomfortable question is, where do you live? And if you can tell them the name of your city or town and they accept that, fine, no problem. But if they keep prying with follow-up questions to the point where they want to know the very neighborhood where you live, well, that's getting too personal, almost stalkerish. Now, there are two strategies I would offer for answering these uncomfortable questions. The first, if you can think of it on the spot, is vague humor. You might say, I live on either side of the river. And that could be the whole town, so it's kind of funny that you dodge the question without exactly telling them off. And hopefully they get the hint. Another example might be, I'll tell you my exact address when I invite you over for Christmas dinner. So hopefully they laugh about it and the whole situation can pass without anyone losing face. Otherwise, if you can't really think of something, or if you really feel like this is a problem that needs to be corrected, you can find a softer way to go about it, yet more precisely. So you might say, excuse me, but this is the first time we are meeting. This conversation is getting a little too personal. I hope that over the long run, we can become closer friends, and then we can learn more about each other. So that would also be another great way to dodge an uncomfortable question and still correct people around culture. Now, not all communication is verbal. Much of it is also nonverbal. Sometimes people will get a little pushy. You might be standing somewhere and they think they know better. They think you shouldn't be standing there or you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, and they might actually push you out of the way, usher you aside. And this isn't good because automatically they're putting themselves on a much higher position than you are. Like they know better and you don't. But it could turn out that you have much better reasons than what they understand, and you are actually the more conscious one in the situation. But it'll be too late if maybe minutes later you're trying to explain to them. At the moment when you feel someone's pushing you over and over again, you might hunker down and give some resistance and throw them a look, a very serious look that lets them know that they should stop what they're doing right away. Because you too are a human being, you have rights, and you have your own direction in life. And as long as you're not breaking any rules, then it's your prerogative where you go and what you do. Another example would be when people help themselves to your property. I can give a precise illustration. I heard a story from a tourist, and he was visiting a new country with a new currency. He wasn't familiar with it. So he stopped to study it and sort of count it out very carefully, which was taking some time. And the other person took the money from their hands, counted out as much as they needed, and returned the bundle. And even if they were most honest, it's still a matter of principle. You don't take somebody else's property to yourself and do with it as you will. Even if they take 5 minutes counting out the money, you have no right to take that. And the person was very insulted, but they were humiliated, you could say, in the moment. So again, what would be my reaction? Hopefully I have my wits about me and I grab forward and take my money back. If they can take it out of my hands, I can take it back out of theirs because it's mine. So again, hopefully verbal communication will serve us better, but in the moment, if it's getting physical on one side, then you also have to respond with a little more resistance on your end. We have all heard the advice, prevention is better than treatment. So, when sometimes we get asked uncomfortable questions, or when people take pushy actions towards us, it might not be a bad idea to lock everything down that you possibly can. So, when I think of locking, an image that pops into my mind is of a house. We can use it as an analogy. When I was a student, I moved into a house with 2 other housemates, and they told me at night we don't lock the door because this is a safe neighborhood. And I can believe that maybe 99% of the time nothing would ever happen. But if there was a 1% chance that at night somebody could be making rounds about while everyone was sleeping, checking which doors are locked or unlocked, that was enough reason for me to go down the stairs before going to bed, lock the door, and then go sleep more soundly. So besides the door, sometimes we hear stories of neighbors arguing because they're no longer sure where one yard ends and another begins. Maybe somebody has planted a tree and now they think the area around it is theirs and it's right along the border. So there are these arguments that could have been avoided. If somebody, let's say, put up a fence in time or some kind of a demarcation, maybe like a stone that wouldn't be moved, then it would not come to that sort of a misunderstanding. And finally, while we're at it, I would also advise perhaps putting up cameras. Now, what does this mean in the analogy? To have more evidence of what is going on, like a record. In case there was an intrusion or a break-in, it can easily be verified if there were cameras and corrected. But if there weren't, then nobody knows what happened, perhaps. So what happens if somebody actually cheats you out of what is yours? Granted that is not too significant, that is more of a petty crime, I'll set it up with an introduction of the book The Fortress by Misha Selimovic, a Bosnian writer that I read. He compared it to the situation of trading. Maybe people are trading sacks of rice or flour, and you pay the price, maybe it's 100 of whatever currency, and you expect to get 100% of the product. But when you weigh it on the scale, you find maybe it's missing a little bit off the top, like 10%. And Misha Selimovic actually suggests that we normalize that people will always take a little bit, and we account for it. So maybe if we think 100% of the bag, maybe we think it should have cost 120, but I'm going to get 90% of it back, and I'm paying 100, so that's the normal. And I will make this connection with the Bible for forgiveness, when Jesus says, if someone asks for your cloak, give it to him. Maybe somebody took a tool you needed for your work, and you could spend the rest of the day feeling horrible about it, so you plumb it and not do anything. Or you might catch yourself and think, maybe they needed it more. Forgive it, and then you could start moving up with whatever else you needed to do, and you could end up being in a better position for having avoided all that struggle, for having just focused on the positive. Having considered both the positive and the negative sides of people, how can we orient ourselves in relation to them? And a single phrase that covers it, I think, would be to be firm but fair. And I'll give another example here. When I was in middle school, we had an assistant principal. And the image that I have in my mind is when we would get to school in the morning, even from the yard, We could see him. He was always wearing a suit, very respectable looking, and he had his walkie-talkie with him, and he would consult and he would move around the area, making sure everything was running smoothly. So he looked almost like a security guard, which could have been a little bit scary for students, but we also knew that we were safe because he loved being a teacher with students, serving his school and serving the community. Sometimes there were bad things that would happen, like maybe cases of bullying, and he was the one that had to deal with it. He might have to do something unpopular or difficult, like suspending students for a few days or calling parents. But he did that job very responsibly, and then the problems would fade away. So that's the example that I have in my mind. That's the gradient. We have to think within our own hearts. Do we fall more on the fair side, or being too lenient, perhaps, or on the strict side? Then we have to find the center.